Welcome to It's a Grand Life, where our mission is to be a voice for grand families and kinship caregivers everywhere. Did you know that in the United States alone, there are 2.3 million grandparents raising their grandchildren? 2.3 million. It's a Grand Life is committed to making a difference for those kids. That's why we have the podcast, a Facebook group, and the Grand Fund. The Grand Fund, which is a 501c3 which was launched in June of 2024, provides financial assistance to grand families, including shelter, food, clothing, and household needs. Grand families are in every neighborhood, in every city, every tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, we're here for you, and we welcome you to join us on this mission. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. You can also join our Facebook group. Just search for it under It's a Grand Life. And your reviews, comments, and sharing of our podcasts help us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hello. We'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And today we're going to talk about the exciting topic of what advocacy means for grand families. We've got Char S. joining us from Pennsylvania, and she was on before, and we got to everything but all the work that she does advocating for grand families and kinship caregivers. And Char, we just want to welcome you again to It's a Grand Life, and can't wait to hear about the recent advocacy that you're involved in and the Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Advisory Council in DC and all the other things you've been doing. But thanks again for joining us on It's a Grand Life.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to see you today.
Good to see you as well. And I was really intrigued when you, even just a few minutes ago, you were sharing about meeting with the folks actually from the government out of Pennsylvania. You've met with Senator Fetterman and others, and you were talking about trying to really get some tangible monetary support for grand families in Pennsylvania. And how did that work out, and how did you get involved in that?
Well, first of all, I was cultivated to apply to be a member of an advisory council for grandparents raising grandchildren in Washington, D.C. There was a bill that was introduced by Senators Susan Collins and Robert Casey back in 2017, I believe, to form an advisory council for grandparents raising grandchildren because of the situation in our country where there are so many more of these situations occurring. It's on the rise. And so I threw my hat into the ring, not knowing whether I'd get selected, but I did. I was appointed to the advisory council. And so I worked with a number of people in the federal government, as well as Generations United and other caregivers from all walks of life who have been impacted by this situation. And we had several sessions together and ended up, in the end, preparing a report to Congress that was about 88 pages long, and that was delivered in November of 2021. And that was intended to notify Congress and inform them about the situation, bring them up to speed on what's happening. And so after that, I was approached by Generations United to see if I'd be willing to serve as a Grand Voice advocate. And I had appreciated Jai Lent very much, working with her on the advisory council, so I was very pleased to be part of that. And I began advocating within Generations United. Last summer, they had a conference, which I attended. And while I was in Washington, D.C. for the conference, one of their staff members set up meetings for me to meet with my particular Congress and as congressmen, as well as senators in Pennsylvania, which I did meet with their staff members mostly. When I went to Capitol Hill and met with their staff. But it was back then that I had been thinking a lot about the opioid settlement money and how important it would be to consider sharing some of that with these children who are the generation of children left behind by the opioid addiction of their parents.
Right.
And So back then, last summer, I did mention to each of the senators and congressmen that I would like to see some opioid settlement money go into the hands of the families. And so that's kind of how it has transpired over time.
And how was it received when you met with the senators and the other folks from Pennsylvania? Were they open to the idea, or were they familiar with the Grand family epidemic and what's happening in our country?
I think some more than others. I feel that Senator Casey's staff is more knowledgeable about this area than Congressman DeLuzio. He was a newly elected congressman, and I didn't talk with him directly, but I don't think his staff really seemed to be engaging about it. Senator Fetterman's staff, I thought, seemed somewhat aware, but not particularly informed about it. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Char, did you feel that after you had those meetings and you left, do you think there was any interest? Did they follow up with you after the fact, or was that left for you to pursue and to follow up with them?
Yes.
No,
there was no follow up at all.
Okay.
And I sent a follow up email to everyone, thanking them for the visit and reiterating what I had spoken about. And I never got anything back. So that is it's a year ago now.
Right.
And so I forged ahead, and it's been in the back of my mind because the settlement money from the big pharma has gone to each state.
Right.
And then the states have been charged with how to handle the settlement money. And what I learned was that in Pennsylvania, there was a opioid settlement trust that was established that the work that they're doing is to decide how to allocate funds. And so I only recently found out about that. And I had asked two people about settlement money. One was a gentleman from my area that had been appointed by President Obama to head up the opioid task force. And another was my local representative. And both of them, when I asked them about, do you think we could allocate some settlement money to grand families and kinship care providers, both of them said, I think the money is already earmarked. So what I've done is I've gone into that task force reporting and looked at everything, and there is no money at all of all those millions of dollars that was thought to go to these families.
Really?
So there is about $2.9 million remaining that has been not approved yet, but it was discussed that it might go to certain things. They are not grand families or kinship care families. So I'm thinking I'm going to probably try to see if we could, even though it's late, see all these decisions were made and I'm late to the party.
Right.
I think it's worth a try to at least reach out and do something. So what I am doing is I'm participating in a forum with my local county this coming week and talking about grand families and kinship care families that are informal. And I'm going to mention this at that forum. So I'll keep doing what I can.
Absolutely.
But I think, we tend to be the quiet care providers. We aren't demanding. We don't, those of us that have been in the informal care situation versus the child welfare system.
Right.
Family members who have just simply stepped up to take care of these kids don't know about resources that could be available, and they don't really ask for any. And one thing that they did do in my county was they did a project to award, I think it was $1,000 to hundreds of low-income families.
Okay.
That had kinship care or grand family arrangements. I'm not clear whether they were under the child welfare system or not. But
interesting.
But again, it's income driven. Those decisions are income driven. And I think we all agree that the people at the lower end of the income spectrum deserve to be supported.
Absolutely.
But I will say summer's expensive with children.
Huh.
And,
it's crazy expensive. Yep.
And so what I was really happy to hear is one of our advocates was able to accomplish in Alabama, having $270,000 appropriated to grand families and kinship caregivers that have formed related to the opioid epidemic. And 3 counties, each county is getting $90,000. And it's not income specified. So I like that because all these families could use some help, and all these kids cost a lot of money
Right.
to raise.
So
that's what's happened.
Would $90,000 really bless the folks in your county? Would that make a big difference for them? I mean, as far as folks, grandparents raised, do you know how many grand families there are in your county?
We don't, and that's one thing and that I have wanted to do was start a support group in my particular area because there isn't one, and there is a support group outside my area that is conducted and run by the child welfare system.
Okay.
But in terms of informal caregivers having a support group, to my knowledge, there's nothing in my neck of the woods. So I've thought about starting one, and I'm getting some support from this agency that is part of the child welfare system to do that. We're going to get back together after January. But what I'm thinking is that's a start to try to identify how many families there are, because they're informal, so they're not on record, so we really just don't know. But I can tell you right now, I could throw a stone from where I am sitting right now and hit probably 3 houses where I know that there are grandparents raising a grandchild because of opioids.
That's
Allegheny
amazing.
County was really heavily hit with the epidemic. Different areas of the country have been hit harder than others, but southwestern Pennsylvania in particular was very hard hit.
But that's a real true statement, though. It's the grandparents raising grandkids is everywhere. You know, there's I heard a number from our friends at Generations United that there's 2.3 million families nationally, but I think there's more than that. And because if you can hit 3 families from where you live, and I know I could probably hit 3 where I live. I mean that's everywhere. It's just. But the unique thing about your story, Char, is that you started advocating before you were a grand voice, and which is something I hope you can touch on for our listeners. You don't have to be part of a formal agency. You just have to have a passion to want to help kinship caregivers and grand families, right?
Yes, there's absolutely truth to that. And the reason I got involved, well, first of all, I'd like to say that the experience of finding yourself in this situation is incredibly isolating. It's very, very difficult because here you are, you know, you've taken in a grandchild. It's not the natural order of things. All of your friends that you had to socialize with and play bunco with, or in my place of employment, I just felt like I was in a crisis personally, and I felt like a fish out of water, like I really didn't fit into their social settings anymore.
Right.
So it's very isolating. So I would encourage anyone who finds themselves in this situation to join some kind of an advocacy group or start your own, and form alliances with others that are in your situation, because that's when you're going to start to feel better.
That's a great point, because we all need community. And if you're just sitting at home and you and your husband are dealing with the situation, that's wonderful, but that gets tough at times, and we need to reach out to others. And I know it takes effort, and sometimes we're uncomfortable when we do that, but we always feel better when we're connected with folks that are unfortunately in the same boat that we are.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I think dealing with the opioid situation, I have learned that I have a lot of trauma of my own, having lived through watching, you know, what happened.
Yes.
and being somewhat of an innocent bystander, being powerless to fix it, not knowing what to do, where to go. And so I plan to continue to work on that aspect of, I feel almost like I need a portion of recovery, and you
100%.
can't just bury it and go on with your life. It's a trauma and a crisis that you've lived through. And so it's important to address your mental health. Very important.
And Char, don't you feel sometimes that some days are better than others? You know, maybe on Monday you're strong and resilient and you just had a wonderful, relaxing weekend, but Tuesday comes around and you hear something, or you're reminded of some of the trauma and the pain that you've gone through, and it's such a challenge. So we do need one another, and we do need a community, and we do have to watch our mental health. And thank God the stereotype and the stigma is gone. You know, I was talking to one of our Grand Voice colleagues out of Colorado, Gail Engel, who was saying, you know what we need is we need the federal government to launch a boot camp for psychotherapists. We need a ton of psychotherapists. And in World War II, they drafted folks to do this or that. I forget what she was saying specifically, but we need to have a call to get more folks into behavioral health, because between the fentanyl and the opiates and social media, the need for good, solid counseling is exploding. Don't you think?
Oh, there's no question about it. And as a result of being part of a Grand Voice Network, our Grand Voice Network, I was approached to help with University of Maine to develop a curriculum around this topic for their graduate school of social work. So they're ahead of the curve. They're doing something. They're starting to educate their students about this issue of grand families and kinship care families resulting from substance use disorders. And so, yeah, I mean, I have been very frustrated by the lack of resources available to me. Only recently, and this is years later, have I found somebody that I truly believe understands this dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very specialized field.
Right.
So we do need help.
And absolutely. But it starts with community, and then the mental health counseling's invaluable. But if for the folks that may be listening to this podcast that they want to do something, they want to help make a difference, what direction would you point them in to become advocates for grand families?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to build alliance with others in the same situation in the form of some sort of a support group. Whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but there is information available at Generations United in their resource library, I believe, on how to start a support group. But I think getting involved with others who have the same experience is the ground floor. And how you find those people, I don't know. One of the ideas I had was, as I move forward, putting a notice in the church bulletins around the community and just say basically, hey, are you or do you know someone who is raising a grandchild or child relative due to, it doesn't even say due to anything.
Right.
It's just, are you a grandparent or other kin raising a child? If so, here's a number you can call and let's find out about you. So that, I think, reaching out in the church communities would be helpful.
That's a great idea. Yep. Or we've been reaching out to folks in the senior groups in our town. They have senior, it's a group called Nest here in our area, and it's all about events for seniors, and most of those events are fun things. But if you could identify folks that could benefit from a support group that's for grandparents or kin raising grandkids, that would be absolutely terrific too.
Yeah, and I think too, tapping into the Agency on Aging.
Yes.
In the local area. Our Agency on Aging, when I reached out to them before, didn't know of any support groups or have any information about that. But maybe that's that's the time to, if you're going to be doing something yourself or with a couple other people, pull them into the loop and get them involved too, and build an alliance there.
That's just a great idea. So to become an advocate, you need to start with making sure you're okay, get your own support group going, or join a support group, and maybe network with churches and try and identify colleagues there, folks that may be raising grandkids as grandparents or as other kin, and then reach out to your area agency on aging and see if there isn't some support with that. And that sounds like a great place to start.
Yes. Or what about even local community programs directed at retired people?
Yes. And there's a lot of those programs. But what I find when I chat with our colleagues across the country, many of the folks who would be retired now aren't, because the cost of supporting the grandkids and what have you is really significant, especially with the inflation that's out there now. And one of the grandparents is still working, and someone else.
Yes.
I hear this all the time.
I know. My husband I left my job when I had my infant grandson to care for, because I felt too conflicted to continue to work. And so that was a difficult challenge for me to walk away from that, but I did it. But my husband put off retirement because of the cost involved. And, in this situation, it's not just the cost of raising another child. How about all the money you spend trying to help your child with their issues that they're having?
Right.
Whether it's interventions or admissions to treatment facilities, that's its own cottage industry. So there's a lot of expense involved in that when you have a loved one who is in the throes of addiction.
And what if the kids are affected with the addiction? And we've talked to a number of colleagues like that, where they're helping kids who have fetal alcohol issues and other issues that just put them behind the eight ball, and it requires significant financial resources to get the specialists involved to give these little ones a proper start in life. And in some cases, they're still a little behind the eight ball moving forward because of the abuse of the parent.
Well, that's right. And the other thing is, when you're retired or when you turn 65, you're forced onto Medicare.
Right.
And we had good health insurance for our grandchild, but we were forced onto Medicare, and Medicare doesn't cover kids.
No, it does not. And
so then we had to go get him a policy. And we do have Medicaid for kids, things like that. But honestly, I've never really navigated all of that. We went out and purchased a health insurance policy for him and kept him on COBRA.
Okay.
We weren't allowed to stay on COBRA, but he was allowed on COBRA. So we've been paying for COBRA because he needs orthodontic treatment.
100%. Yeah.
I took him to the orthodontist 2 weeks ago, and this is the second phase of treatment, and the cost is $5,050.
I know. So you went to your money tree and just pulled down a couple thousand and...
Yeah, I've watered it and fertilized it
for 30 years, and right. But no, that's the real world. Yeah.
Getting back to the finances of it. Okay, so in Alabama, maybe $90,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you could put $1,000 or $2,000 into the pockets of these families, that's going to pay for back to school clothes and supplies. That's going to pay for a camp or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than having to come up with it.
But it gets the grand families and the kinship caregivers in the loop, in the discussion, into the equation. Right now, we're like your story. You're fighting City Hall. They're not concerned about grand families. This is a new opportunity to support a new group to support that they're maybe just coming into knowledge of how extreme it is. It's everywhere, And there, I mean, there's grand families in every state, tribe, territory in our country, and it continues to grow, and especially with these
Yeah.
behavioral health issues and the fentanyl epidemics and what have you. But
Right. And to hear the opioid settlement money, okay, I'm late to the party. I understand that. But to know that there have been millions and millions of dollars come our way and not one person involved thought about these families.
no, 100%. It's mind-boggling. And
Yeah, it really is.
so are we just too busy as grand family parents to shake enough senators and congressmen to wake them up that this is a real problem, and we know, bottom line, based on the data coming out of Generations United, that 20% of us are in extreme poverty, and so if there's 2 million, gosh, that's what, 400,000 grand families that are really, really struggling, and we may have to trim our sails a little bit. But if you weren't even prepared for your own retirement, and now you have Social Security and Medicare, that's you can't really live too high on that, and then you have 1 to 2 or 3 additional mouths to feed. That's just an incredible challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, I'm not sure how to best shake the trees. I have mentioned before, maybe it's time for all these grand families to band together and file some sort of a class action suit against these companies, because they're stuck with the bill to raise all these kids.
100%.
And we do it out of love, and all of us would do it no matter what. And we would sacrifice everything we have for these kids. There's no question about it. So the decision's made.
Right.
But why should these families be struggling so much when there are resources out there and there's just nobody's thinking about them?
Well, Char, that is one of the reasons why we have It's a Grand Life. I mean, I'm trying to connect with all of the grand voices, all of the grandparents raising grandkids across the country. And I do want us to come together, because if we were all part of our Facebook group or and what have you, if we knew what was going on in Sacramento, California, and we could all come alongside Bob Rubel and others who are advocating out there and really make our voices known, I think we could really move the needle. But it's you in Pennsylvania, myself in Michigan, we're doing our best. But boy, if we came together, that would be incredibly powerful. And
yes.
But what really occurred to me the other day when I was thinking about all the wonderful people that I meet on this podcast, like yourself, they're all others focused, they're self-emptying, and their love is totally unconditional. And for these kids, we would do anything for our kids.
Yes.
And and the love is powerful. And if we had 86 grand voices on the same page, and if we each had 10 to 100 folks that are part of our community, I mean, that's a lot of voices. That's a lot of advocacy, and that's a lot of love. The great thing about being in this process with you and others is that there's no talk about, are you Republican or Democrat, or are you this ethnic group or that ethnic group? No, we're concerned, how do we take care of our grands, and how do we make life, well, how do we level the playing field for them, and how do we prevent other families into getting into the state? And that's powerful, I think.
Yeah, and I think, do these policies come from the top down? Sometimes I like to think big. Sometimes I think I'd like to approach each presidential candidate and get their ear about this issue and see what they have to say. Because quite honestly, we are a big voting bloc, our age group.
100%. And I do like how you think. You're the one that brought up the class action. That's absolutely great. And I've already reached out to J.D. Vance. Once I found out that he was raised by his grandma.
Yes.
I reached out to his office and said, hey, we want to interview you and get your story out here, because there's a lot of grand families that can relate to what a terrific, whether you're Republican or Democrat. You can't point fingers at this guy's story. who ended up in Yale, and just grandma was right in the middle of that and really helped him turn his life around. And that is for you and I, that's America. That's the America we know.
Right. And did you have any success?
I haven't heard yet. I just I reached out at the end of the convention once I heard him talk about his grandparents, and I watched the movie Hillbilly Elegy, I think it's called.
Yes.
I said this guy would be perfect for our podcast. It'd be great if he could become part of Generations United, even in a just a sponsorship role. But I don't know. But again, everybody'd have to put their political hat, leave that in the car, and let's just talk about how do we.
Exactly. And at one point, I made a list of people that had in the public eye who had been raised by their grandparent or grandparents. And I gave that to my grandson.
Okay. Really? I love that.
Because I wanted him to see how, yes, his life is different than most of the kids that he's around, but he can still have a wonderful life. And some of the names that came up with, I think, and I'm going to have to stretch my memory at this point, but I believe Oprah Winfrey was raised by her grandparents.
Wow.
I thought Bill Clinton was raised by.
Bill Clinton was, yep.
And I think Barack Obama was raised by his grandparents.
I think he was, yep.
And now we have J.D. Vance.
Yep.
So that you and I are on the same page.
I really think we're onto something here, and but there are. I think there's another great idea for our listeners. Just find out, get a list of influencers, celebrities that were raised by their grandparents, and share that with your kids. You could be a Bill Clinton, you could be a Barack Obama, you could be a J.D. Vance, and It doesn't matter what policy. The thing is, you can be successful in your individual giftedness. Don't quit. Keep it up. And none of our lives are perfect, but Char, I just thank you so much for being our guest here, and It's a Grand Life. You always leave us with a lot of great material. You need to be in a support group. You need to maybe reach out to folks in other churches if you want to identify folks that are in the same situation that you're in. And the Area Agency on Aging, and also the community programs designed for seniors. These are all resources to reach folks that are in the same boat that you're in. And this idea of the class action, I think, we have to absolutely talk about that, because I think it may take litigation to really move the needle. But thanks so much for being our guest here today.
Well,
It's
Craig,
a Great Life.
Likewise, I want to thank you for all you are doing to help us and pulling information together, and you are relentless in your commitment to this. And so I'm sure that all of us out here in the world are very appreciative of what you're doing.
Well,
Thank you.
Is, it's I don't want to waste my pain, as Rick Warren said. So this, but yeah. I do see things happening in a real positive way. We did just launch our grant fund, and we're trying to raise resources to help folks, and I think that may just take off. So we've got some news coming on that and subsequent shows. But Char, thanks so much for being our guest, and we'll get caught up again on what's going on in Pennsylvania and what's going on nationally. But really appreciate all your time today.
Well, I appreciate yours too, and thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.